greatest philanthropist of all time, in my opinion, is Uorren Buffett, because over the course of his lifetime, he's made over $100 billion, and he's committed that he's already given or will give when he dies 99% of his money to philanthropy. And he's also dictated in his will that all the money, almost $100 billion, when he dies, will be spent and put to good use within 10 years of him dying. Wealthy and successful of today will be helping solve the problems of today. I think that's a lot of what the Ribakov Foundation is about, and the Ribakov Prize. Warren once invited me to dinner to talk about philanthropy. So we meet at a steak restaurant, a very simple steak restaurant. Warren Buffett has a very simple philosophy when it comes to food. He says, if a 5-year-old won't eat it, I won't eat it. And so we had steak and French fries, and we washed it down with a delicious chocolate milkshake. And we talked about philanthropy, and we talked about some initiatives that we wanted to do together. And then at the end of the meal, we leave, and he says, I will give you a ride back to your hotel, because there was no flight back to New York that late. Warren does not have a bodyguard. He drives his own car. It's like a 20-year-old Cadillac. So we drive across the river. He knows Omaha like nobody else. But it turns out he had not spent much time in Iowa because we got lost. And I'm looking at him, and the sun has set, and it's getting dark, and it's getting darker. And I was looking at Warren, and I saw a man in his 80s driving a car when it's dark. And I had to make a choice, one of these very important life choices, that I can either go to Warren and say, Warren, you're in your 80s, why don't you pull over and let me drive so I can choose to be safe and insult him, or I can let him drive and we can die. And I thought about it, I looked at him, and I respect him so much, so I chose death. And there would be Warren Buffett died, and I would be like a little asterisk, like, oh yeah, and the editor of Forbes died too, just like a little parenthetical, but that'd be okay, so we choose death. So we're driving, but the funny thing happens when you're facing death. You start talking real. You start having a real bonding conversation. So I asked him, how would you like to be remembered? And he told me something that was very surprising and I was not expecting. I only want one word on my tombstone. Teacher. He said, listen, I try very hard to be a great teacher because everything I learned came from 3 people. One was my father, one was my first wife, and the other was my teacher, a teacher at Columbia Business School in New York named Benjamin Graham, very famous business teacher. Benjamin Graham taught him was that there were only 2 rules of investing. The first rule is don't lose money on any deal. Never lose money on a deal. The second rule is never forget the first rule. And he says that those 2 rules, one rule, but 2 rules, are why he was able to be so successful and to be able to give so much money away. So he said he always appreciated his teacher and he wanted to be a good teacher. When Warren Buffett says, I want to be remembered as a teacher, not as a philanthropist, not as a business person or an investor, as a teacher, it's a reminder to all of us that if we're doing our job right, and if we are creating change for the world, and if we are having an influence, then that should be the goal of all of us. That when we die and when we move on and the world we leave, if the word teacher is on our tombstone, we've done a great thing. Spasiba. Thank you.